Something I thought I'd recover from in a matter of days turned into something more complicated. A fall in my kitchen, a fractured hip, a slow recovery. My doctor suggested that I stay in a rehabilitation facility. 2 weeks, he assured me, a place where I could focus on healing without the risk of at home. My children, worried but busy with their own lives, encouraged it. I agreed, reluctantly. At first, I told myself this was temporary, just a pause, a small detour. But as the days stretched into weeks, something inside me began to shift. You see, I wasn't the only one there. The first thing you notice in a place like that isn't the hospital beds or the quiet shuffle of nurses moving from room. It's the people. Some had been there years. Some were recovering just like me. Others had themselves to go. I met Robert, our pioneer who once worked on projects for NASA. Brilliant mind. His hands were steady when he talked about the spacecraft he helped design, but they trembled when he tried to hold a spoon. Hadn't there in years ago, and his only son lived across country, 2 kids, and was Margaret, 81 years old, who used to be a teacher. She had taught for decades, shaping young minds, making a difference. And yet, in this place, she felt invisible. Her students had long moved on, her own children caught up in their own lives. She told me that sometimes she wondered if people even remembered she existed. It hit me then. A lifetime of accomplishments, a history rich with memories and achievements. Yet here they were, waiting for a visit, waiting for a call, waiting for someone to remember them. I had always thought that the biggest challenges of old age were physical, the aches, the illnesses, the limitations, but I was wrong. What I saw in that place made me realize the hardest part of growing old isn't losing your strength. It's losing your place in the world. I started paying attention to the stories around me, the unspoken truths in the quiet hallways. There were those who had found peace, who had come to terms with the passage of time. But many, too many, felt regret. Not for the things they did, but for the things they didn't do. As the days turned into weeks, my perspective changed. I stopped counting down the days until I could leave and started paying attention to the lessons life was quietly teaching me. 60 days. That's how long I spent there. 60 days that completely rewired the way I see the world. And if you're listening to this right now, whether you're 25 or 65, let me tell you something, one day you'll be old. One day, you'll look back on your life, just as I did, and the question isn't going to be, how much money did I make? Or, how many hours did I work? The question will be, did I live in a way that, when the time comes, I won't be sitting in a quiet room, filled with regret? So let me share with you the 7 lessons I learned in those 60 days. Lessons I wish I had known decades earlier. Because if you listen now, really listen, you might not have to learn them the hard way like I did. The first thing you notice in a nursing home isn't the sterile smell of antiseptic or the hum of the fluorescent lights. It's the silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy, lingering kind. The kind of silence that comes when life slows down. Not by choice, but by circumstance. Henry wasn't used to this kind of quiet. He had spent decades moving at full speed, making deals, traveling, shaking hands. His world had always been filled with movement, constant, relentless movement. But here everything was still, and for the first time in years, he had nothing but time to listen. At first, he told himself. He wasn't like the others, he told himself. He had a home, family, friends. This was temporary, just a brief stop before he went back to real life. But as the days stretched into weeks, he began to notice something unsettling. Some of the people here had been in this place for years. Some were visited by family. Their children stopped by once a week, maybe once a month, bringing flowers or baked goods and making polite conversation before checking their watches and heading back to their busy lives. And then there were the others, the ones who had no visitors, the ones who sat in the common room, eyes flicker toward the door every time it opened, hoping, just for a second, that someone had come for them. But no one ever did. One afternoon, Henry met a man named Walter. He was 89 years old, a former professor of literature, sharp as ever. When they spoke, Walter quoted Hemingway, recited Shakespeare, talked about the books he once loved. He had spent a lifetime teaching students about the power of words. And yet, in this place, his voice rarely found a listener. Another day, he met Evelyn. At 94, she had once been a pianist, playing in concert halls across the country. She had performed in front of thousands, her fingers dancing effortlessly over the keys, but arthritis had stolen her ability to play. The last time her son had visited, she said, was Christmas, 3 years ago. Henry listened, and with every conversation, realization settled deep in his bones. Life doesn't stop for anyone. The world keeps spinning, whether you're in it or not. There was something profoundly humbling about that. He had spent his entire life believing in his own importance, in the weight of his presence. But here, in these quiet hallways, he saw a truth that no one likes to talk about. No matter who you are, no matter what you built, time will move on without you. Think about Anthony Bourdain, a man who traveled the world, shared meals with strangers, explored every corner of human connection. And yet, in the end, it wasn't the exotic places or Michelin-star meals that mattered. It was the people, the moments, the stories. Henry had spent his life building a legacy, accumulating wealth, making sure his name meant something. But for what? Would it matter when he was gone? Would it keep the people he loved sitting beside him when he could no longer offer them anything in return? He started talking to more people. He asked questions, really listened. And the more he listened, the more he understood that old age wasn't just about health. It wasn't just about keeping your body from breaking down. It was about something far greater. Connections you carry with you. He saw it in the way Walter's face lit up when someone asked about his favorite book. He saw it in Evelyn's trembling hands as she played an imaginary piano on the table, remembering the music that once lived in her fingertips. It became clear to him, painfully, undeniably clear, that the greatest loss in life is the loss of youth. It's the loss of relevance, of feeling like you matter to someone. And so he began to wonder, what he did to ensure he wouldn't end up like so many people here, waiting for a phone call that never comes, hoping for a visit that will never happen? Because here's the hard truth most people don't want to hear. You don't wake up one day and find yourself alone. It happens slowly. It happens when you prioritize the wrong things. And you assume that the people in your life will always be there, even when you don't make the effort to show up for them. And if you're not careful, you might wake up one day and realize that all the things you thought mattered, money, status, success, none of it will keep you from sitting alone in a quiet room, watching the world move on without you. Henry wasn't sure how long he would be here, but what he did know, what he was beginning to understand on a level deeper than ever before, was that when he left, he would do things differently. Because if life was going to keep moving forward, he wanted to make sure he wasn't just watching from the sidelines. There's a disease more dangerous than heart failure, more disruptive than cancer, more crippling than arthritis. It doesn't show up on x-rays. No blood test can detect it. But if you walk into any nursing home, you'll see its symptoms everywhere. It's called loneliness, and it's killing people. Henry saw it with his own eyes. He had expected the physical decline, the slow steps, the trembling hands. But what he hadn't expected was emptiness. The way some residents would sit by the window for hours, watching the parking lot, hoping today would be different. Hoping someone walked through the doors and say, I'm here for you. But no one came. He met Richard, a man who had once been a CEO, who had spent his life building a company that employed thousands. Now he spent his days staring at a television he wasn't even watching, eating meals in silence, waiting for a son who hadn't visited in 2 years. Then there was Alice, 87, a retired school principal. She used to command full of children, guide generations of students. Now the only people who spoke to her were the nurses who came to check her vitals. Henry started paying attention to the conversations. He listened, and what he heard over and over again was not anger, not bitterness, but regret. I thought they'd visit more. I should have made more time for my friends. I wish I hadn't pushed people away. There's this belief we carry when we're younger, this idea that relationships will always be there, that friendships will survive years of neglect, that family bonds can endure a lifetime of I'll call them later. But time doesn't work like that. Relationships are like plants, you either water them or they wither. Look at someone like Anthony Hopkins. The man is 86 years old, an Academy Award-winning legend, and you know what he says is his greatest achievement? Not the films, not the Oscars, but the fact that he wakes up each day and chooses to reach out to people. He calls friends. He keeps relationships alive, because he knows that in the end, nothing else matters. Henry hadn't realized it before, but sitting in that nursing home, watching men and women who had once surrounded people now sit in silence, he understood something with painful clarity. No one is immune to loneliness. Not the rich, not the successful, not the brilliant minds who once shaped industries. We spend our lives chasing things, careers, success, recognition. We convince ourselves that family, friends, real connections, those things can wait, until one day we wake up and the people who mattered most have moved on. Not because they stopped caring, but because we never gave them a reason to stay. Henry thought about his own life, how many dinners he had skipped for work, how many friends he had meant to call but never did, how many moments he had traded for meetings, deadlines, promotions. And sitting in that quiet room, he realized something terrifying. If I don't change now, I could end just like him. Loneliness doesn't happen all at once. It creeps in, slowly, silently, and by the time you notice, it's already taken root. So the question is, what are you doing today, right now, to make sure that doesn't happen to you? Because one day, whether you like it or not, you'll get old. And when that becomes, it won't be your job title or your bank account that keeps you company. It'll be the relationships you built, or ones you let slip away. If money could buy health, Steve Jobs would still be alive today. That was the thought running through Henry's mind as he sat across from George, an 80-year-old man who owned multiple luxury homes, drove the finest cars, and had a net worth that could rival small corporations. Now he sat in a wheelchair, unable to lift a spoon to his mouth, unable to take a single step without assistance. The man who once commanded boardrooms and signed multi-million-dollar deals couldn't even sign his own name anymore. His hands shook too much. George had built an empire. He had spent decades working late nights, taking international flights, sealing deals over expensive dinners. He'd sacrificed weekends, missed birthdays, pushed his body to the limit, all for success. He got it. He had more money than he could ever spend. But what he didn't have sitting in that nursing home was control over his own body. I should have taken better care of myself, George admitted one afternoon. I thought I had time. I thought I could wait. But time doesn't wait. The body doesn't wait. It keeps score. Every sleepless night, every skipped workout, every meal that was more about convenience than nutrition, it all adds up. Henry watched as a nurse came in, gently placing a straw between George's lips so he'd sip his meal replacement shake. The same man who once dined at the most exclusive restaurants in Paris now relied on a tube of liquefied protein to keep him alive. And it hit Henry like freight train that health is the only real currency. We spend our youth trading health for wealth, thinking we can cash in later. But what no one tells you is that when you finally have the time to enjoy life, your body may no longer capable of it. Look at Jeff Bezos. The man built Amazon for nothing. He had the power to buy anything, owner. But you know what he did when he hit his 50s? He stopped chasing money and started chasing longevity. He hired personal trainers, nutritionists, sleep experts. He transformed his body because he understood what so many people learn too late. You can always make more money, but you can't buy more time. George had learned a lesson the hard way. And as Henry listened, he wondered how many people out there were still making the same mistake, telling themselves, I'll start taking care of myself next year. I'll get to it when work slows down. I'll eat better when it's more convenient. The truth is, there will never be perfect time. There will always be a deadline, another project, another excuse. But the body doesn't care about your excuses. One day, it just stops cooperating. And by then, it's too late. George sighed, looking down at his frail hands. I thought success was about numbers, he said. The size of my house, the balance in my bank account. But you know what real success is? Waking up without pain. Being able to walk across a room. Feeding yourself. Henry didn't know what to say, because there was nothing to say. The lesson was right there in front of him in the form of a man who once had everything except one thing that mattered most. So here's the question. What are you doing today to protect your tomorrow? Because one day, no matter how busy you are, no matter how much money you've made, you'll find yourself facing the same truth that George did. And when that day comes, the only thing you'll wish for is the health you once took for granted. If wealth determined happiness, why Robin Williams, a man who had everything, still be enough to leave this world? That was the question running through Henry's mind as he lay in a small, unfamiliar bed, staring at the plain white walls of his nursing homeroom. Just a bed, a chair, a nightstand. That was all he had now. It was strange. Once upon a time, he'd taken pride in his possessions. His house, no, his estate, had a massive, sitting on a sprawling piece of land that a few people would pay millions for. The floors were polished marble, the furniture handpicked from the finest designers. Every detail had been curated, every item a statement of success. And yet he was at 74 with nothing but a few shirts in a closet and nightstand drawer filled with things that no longer mattered. His mind wandered back to the old office, the one with the mahogany desk and floor-to-ceiling windows. He had spent years there, working late, signing contracts, making deals. He had told himself it was all for a purpose, to build something, to create security for his family, to leave a legacy. What did that legacy look like now? He tried to remember the last time he truly enjoyed any of those things. The last time he sat in his home and felt peace instead of pressure. The last time he bought something not because it was impressive, but because it truly brought him joy. He couldn't. That's when it hit him. He had spent his entire life collecting things only to reach a point where those things had no meaning. No matter how expensive, how rare, exclusive, they were all still just things. And now they were sitting in an empty house gathering dust while he sat here gathering regrets. Henry thought about Warren Buffett, one of the richest men in the world. Despite his billions, he still lived in the same modest house he bought in 1958. No luxury mansions, no over-the-top displays of wealth. Buffett understood something that Henry had only now begun to grasp. Possessions don't define a life. Memories do. Relationships do. The moments we create with the people we love do. But Henry had spent so much time chasing status, chasing wealth, that he had let those moments slip away. He thought about the times he had chosen work for dinner with his family, the birthdays he had missed, the vacations he had put off, telling himself there would always be another chance. But chances run out. Time runs out. His old house, his cars, his luxury watches, none of them could bring back the years he had lost. None of them could erase the loneliness he now felt. None of them mattered anymore because they weren't here with him. The only thing he did have were the people who still called. The old friends who hadn't given up on him. The family members who still checked in even after years of neglect. And that's when he realized those were his real assets. Not the house, not the money. The people, the moments, the love. So if you're listening to this now, ask yourself, what are you spending your life chasing? Because when you reach the end, it won't be the size of your house or the balance in your bank account that matters. It'll be the moments you meet, or the ones you missed. Think about Christopher Reeve, a man who once flew across movie screens as Superman, strong, invincible. And then in an instant, fall from a horse took it all away. One moment, he was in control of his body. The next, he was trapped inside it. Henry had never thought much about independence. Not in the way he should have. He had taken it for granted the way most people do. The ability to stand up, walk across the room, or a cup of coffee, button his own shirt. They were things so small, so automatic, that they barely registered as privileges. Until he walked into that nursing home and saw what life looked like when those privileges disappeared. Everywhere he turned, he saw people waiting for a nurse to help them stop, waiting for someone to wheel them down the hallway, waiting to be fit, to be dressed, to be taken to the bathroom. He met Paul, a man who had spent his life as a carpenter, building homes with his own two hands. Now, those hands struggled to hold the fork. I used to shit like it was nothing, Paul told him. Now I can't even tie my own damn shoes. Then there's Margaret, a woman who had spent 40 years cooking for her family, making Sunday dinners that brought everyone together. Now, she couldn't even lift a spoon to her mouth without it shaking. I never thought eating would be the hardest part of my day, she whispered to him. Henry watched it happen every day. People who had once been strong, capable, independent, now reduced to need help for the most basic human functions. And he saw something even more painful than their physical struggles. He saw the shame in their eyes, frustration, the slow, creeping realization that they were no longer in control of their own lives. Because losing your independence isn't just about needing help. It's about losing pieces of yourself. The small, ordinary moments that you never thought twice about, brushing your own hair, standing up without effort, reaching something on a high shelf. When those things are gone, you don't just feel weak. You feel like a different person. Henry had spent his whole life thinking strength was about power, about success, about how much you could achieve. Real strength, he realized, was in the things no one ever talks about. It was in the ability to move freely, to live without asking permission, to take care of yourself without waiting for someone else's hands to do it for you. He thought about Stephen Hawking, a man with one of the greatest minds in history, trapped in a body but refused to obey him. And yet, even Hawking had once said, however difficult life may seem, there is always something you can do and succeed at. But that's the thing, isn't it? We don't think about what we can't do until we can do it. We don't think about what we're losing until it's already gone. So Henry made himself promise. If he ever got out of that place, if he could walk on his own again, live his own spoon, buy his own damn shoes, he would never ever take it for granted again. And if you're listening to this now, if you still have your independence, your mobility, your ability to take care of yourself, don't wait until it's time to appreciate it. Because the cruelest part of life is that we only truly value something once we've lost it. If money and success guaranteed happiness, why did Anthony Bourdain, someone who traveled the world, tasted the finest foods, and lived what seemed like a dream life, still feel empty enough to leave it all behind? That was the question lingering in Henry's mind when he met Martha. She was 86, had no fortune, no family left to visit her, no grand stories of wealth or power. And yet, every time he saw her, she was smiling. Not the polite, forced kind of smile people put on for the world, but a deep, warm, genuine kind of happiness. The kind of joy that radiated from the inside out. One afternoon, curiosity got the best of him. Martha, he asked, how do you do it? How do you stay so happy when you have so little? She chuckled, her frail hands wrapping around a cup of tea, the steam rising gently. I'll think about what I've lost, she said. I enjoy what I still have. Henry let that sink in. Martha had once been a teacher. She had lost her husband years ago, outlived her friends, and had no children to visit her. She had every reason to be bitter, to mourn what was gone, to spend her days looking back at what life had taken from her. But she didn't. Instead, she savored what was still in front of her. She found joy in the morning sunlight streaming through the window, in the warmth of a cup of chamomile tea, in the laughter of a nurse sharing a funny story. She looked forward to small things, a fresh breeze on a warm day, the smell of coffee brewing, a kind word from a stranger. And Henry realized something. Happiness isn't about what you have. It's about what you notice. We spend our lives chasing things, success, money, validation, believing that once we have enough, then we'll be happy. But the truth is, happiness doesn't work that way. If it did, why do so many wealthy, famous people still feel empty? Why do so many people who have everything still feel like something is missing? Look at Keanu Reeves, a man who is faced more lost than most, losing his best friend, his unborn child, the love of his life, and yet he carries himself with grace. He doesn't live in a mansion, doesn't surround himself with excess, doesn't chase status. Instead, he's often seen sitting alone on a park bench, sipping coffee, simply being. And by all accounts, he's at peace. Henry thought about his own life, how often he had been too busy to sit and enjoy his morning coffee, too distracted to appreciate the sound of his children laughing, too focused on the next goal to ever fully live in the moment. And now, here he was, realizing that the things he had spent his whole life ignoring were the things that had mattered all along. Martha had figured it out. The secret wasn't in having more. It was in noticing more. So Henry started paying attention. He took his time drinking his morning tea instead of rushing through it. He stepped outside just to feel the sun on his skin. He started appreciating every touch, every smile, every little joy that had been there all along, waiting. He wondered how people out there waiting, still searching for happiness in all the wrong places. Because here's the truth. If you can't find happiness in the little things, you'll never find it anywhere. And one day, life slows down. When big things get away, the only question will matter is, Do you ever stop long enough to truly enjoy the small moments that were right in front of you? Holding on to anger made life better. Then I Nelson at 20 years in prison. Shoot kids. That was the circling Henry's mind when Raymond, 91-year-old man who spent the last days of his life holding on grudges like they were treasures. Unlike most people in the nursing home, Raymond was weak. His body, though frail, was still stronger than most in his age. His eyes told a different story. They carried the weight of much heavier time. Henry had seen many kinds of pain in that place. Physical pain, loneliness, regret. But nothing compared to the bitterness that sat in Raymond's chest like a slow poison. It didn't take long to figure out why. Raymond's son hadn't visited in years, and if you asked him about it, he wouldn't just tell you the story. He would relive it. Every word sharp, every detail still burning. He betrayed me, Raymond said, his voice steady, his hands trembling. Chose his wife over me, after everything I did for him, after all the sacrifices I made. It wasn't just his son, he had friends he no longer spoke to. A brother he hadn't seen in decades. A wife he had lost but still resented things she said years before she passed. And yet, despite all the anger, all the stories of betrayal, Henry noticed something. People Raymond hated weren't suffering. He was the son who abandoned him. He had moved on, started a family, built a life. The friends he had cut off, they weren't sitting in this nursing home, replaying old arguments in their heads. People who had hurt him were out there, living. But Raymond was trapped. Henry thought about Keanu Reeves, a man who had every reason to be angry at the world. He lost his best friend, his child, the woman he loved. And yet, instead of letting grief turn into bitterness, he let it teach him to love deeper, to live lighter. Grief changes shape, but it never ends, Reeves once said. But he never let it make him cruel. Raymond had let his pain define him. He had carried it for so long that it had become part of who he was. And in doing so, he had imprisoned himself in a life of resentment, while the rest of the world moved on without him. Henry looked at him and saw the truth no one ever wants to admit. Hate doesn't hurt the person you hate, it only hurts you. Raymond, Henry said one day, do you think your son even remembers the argument the way you do? Silence. A long pause. And a sigh. Probably not, he finally admitted. And that was it. That was the moment Henry saw crack in the walls Raymond had built. Because that's the thing about holding on to anger. It keeps you stuck in a story that no one else is even reading anymore. So Henry made himself a promise. He wasn't going to end up like that. If he had to choose between being right or being free, he'd choose freedom every time. If you're listening to this, if there's someone in your life you have forgiven, ask yourself, are you still holding on to them, or are they the ones holding on to you? Because at the end of your life, you won't wish you held on to more grudges. You'll wish you had let them go sooner, not for them, for you. One evening, Henry sat across from Tom in the dining hall. They had met weeks earlier, two old men thrown together by circumstance, both trying to make sense of life in where time moved differently. At night, Tom had left. He left. A joke Henry told. He'd eaten his meal, complained about land soup, shared a story about younger days. The next morning, he was gone. Not in a dramatic way. There was no warning, no sign that anything was wrong. He had simply gone to bed like he always did. And then, just like that, he didn't wake up. Henry sat in his room, staring at the empty chair where Tom had always sat during meals. The thing about getting older is that, logically, that death is always near. You understand it. You expect it. But when it actually comes, when someone who's just there suddenly doesn't feel logical at all, feels unreal. He had seen this before, many times, but this one hit different. Maybe because it was ordinary. The night before, Tom had big plans. Wanted to call his daughter. Wanted to finish the book he was reading. He was looking forward to the peach cobbler they serve on Fridays. And then just like that, his time ran out. Henry thought about Chadwick Boseman, a man who, at the height of his career, was battling cancer in silence. The world saw him as a superhero larger than life, and he knew his time was running out. He knew, and still, he worked, he lived, he gave everything he left. And he was on, people weren't talking about his health, his status, they were talking about how he lived. Henry said it, realizing how many times he had put things off, assumed there would always be a tomorrow. How many times had he thought, I'll call later? How many times had he told himself, I'll take that trip someday? How many times had he assumed that there was still time? But the truth was, Tom had plans for tomorrow. Tomorrow never came. That's when it hit him. Every still day is borrowed time. And most of us live like we have an unlimited supply. He thought about all the days he had wasted. The ones he had spent angry, distracted, worrying about things that never even mattered in the end. The moments he had rushed through, too busy to notice the beauty in them. And he made a decision. He didn't want to just exist for whatever time he had left. He wanted to live. So he picked up the phone and called his son, just to say hi, just to tell him he loved him. He started saying yes to things he had morally ignored. He made enough to laugh more, to reshape her, to slow down. Because someone's asking had taught him anything, it was this: let us know how much time we have left. So whatever it is you've been waiting to do, to wait. Because the greatest tragedy in life isn't death. It's getting to the end and realizing you never truly lived. If life was measured in years alone, then why do some people live to 90 and die full of regret, while others barely make it past 40 and lazy faster? That's the thought in his mind as he passed back, prepared to leave their sitting home. 60 days had passed. 60 days that had changed everything. He had come here thinking it was just a temporary stop, a place to recover. What he hadn't expected was how much he would learn. Not from books, not from but from the people who had already traveled the road ahead of him. He had met men who had built empires but died alone. Women who had raised families but now sat in silence, waiting for visits that never came. People who had spent decades chasing wealth, only to find that all the money in the world couldn't buy back time. And then there were rare ones. The ones who left this world with no regrets. The ones who, despite their age, still had a light in their eyes. The ones who had lived fully and knew without a doubt that they had done it right. So what was the difference? It wasn't luck. It wasn't circumstance. It wasn't about how much money they had or how many years they lived. It was about how they lived. And here's what Henry realized. Most people don't live. They wait. They wait to take care of themselves until their bodies start breaking down. They wait to reach out to loved ones until it's too late to say what should have been said. They wait to enjoy life until they retire, until they have more money, until they have more time. But time doesn't wait. He thought about Kobe Bryant, a man at the peak of his life, his career, his fatherhood, gone in an instant. Do you think he knew that morning would be his last? That his someday would never come? None of us know how much time we have left. And yet, we act like we do. We act like there will always be more time to apologize, to love, to chase dreams, to enjoy the small, beautiful moments that make life worth living. But Henry had seen it firsthand. There are two kinds of people at the end of life. The ones who are at peace, and the ones who are drowning in regret. And the difference? The ones at peace had loved fiercely. They had taken care of themselves. They had laughed more, forgiven more, made time for the people who mattered. They lived in a when time came, they weren't free to go. So if you're listening to this, ask yourself, how are you living right now? Are you present in your life? Or are you just getting through the days? Are you making time for the people you love? Or are you letting time slip away, assuming they'll always be there? Are you waiting to be happy? Or are you choosing happiness in the moment you already have? Because one day, whether years from now or tomorrow morning, your time will run out. And when it does, the only thing that will matter is whether you truly lived. So don't wait.